Great to have a hearing, but when are we going to know the findings from the black box? Wouldn't it be better if we knew everything before you have a hearing?
Well, sure. Look, there's a process. The hearing today is the first hearing that we're holding on this to do what we can to ascertain, number one, what happened. 346 people died in 2 separate plane accidents. The early reports, the early indications are that the causes of those accidents were similar, that it may well have been a malfunctioning angle of attack sensor that caused this new technology on the 737 MAX, what they call the MCAS, to adjust the pitch of the plane downward and ultimately to dive it into the ground, taking 346 souls. We need to know where the investigation stands, what we know, but another major area of inquiry is the process of certification of the 737 MAX to begin with. There have been multiple reports that Boeing itself was deeply involved and embedded in the certification process. And from the Committee on Aviation and Space, we want to know how Boeing, how private companies are involved in the FAA's certification process. Is that process, why didn't that process catch this problem if this was the cause of the accident, and what needs to be done, number one, to make sure these planes are safe to fly, and number two, to make sure that the oversight and regulatory system is preventing and catching these malfunctions before they occur.
Senator, with something as high-tech and complicated as one of these aircraft today, how could the FAA possibly try to figure out how to certify it without the help from the company that manufactured it? I don't understand how that...
Well,
and I'm just wondering, is there any, and I've seen it, we had Ralph Nader on, at this point, is there some type of, anywhere you're looking, some type of implied malfeasance from any party in this whole process, in your view?
Look, there is very potentially malfeasance here. We don't know, and we're not going to jump to conclusions, but we need to see what the evidence holds. We have right now 2 planes in a period of 5 months that according to the satellite data, had very similar erratic altitude changes. And one of the issues of inquiry also is when this change was made, why was it not better reflected in the pilot's manuals? Why was it not part of the pilot's training? Imagine for a second you're a pilot on an Ethiopian plane. You're flying a jet. You think it's just like the 737 that you've flown for years, except suddenly the nose starts going down, and you don't know why, because there wasn't a signal to tell you that a computer system has suddenly started steering the plane down. On the old 737, if you pulled back the yoke, it disengaged the stabilization system. On the 737 MAX, you pull back the yoke, and it didn't disengage. So these pilots are pulling back the yoke. They're pulling out the manuals, trying to figure out what on earth is going on with this plane, and all the meantime, it's going down and down and down. That's not an acceptable outcome. That's not an outcome that is putting the safety of the flying public first.
Senator,
and yes, the company should be involved, but it is not the FAA's role to be handing the decision of certification over to the private company. The private company had economic incentives not to require any more training because that drives up costs. But if you've changed the system substantially, you've got to make sure the pilots are trained adequately to ensure the safety of the flying public.
Senator, it's a very good summary of everything we've heard to this state, and a good stance, I think, on how you come at this. My question is, do you know anything about the new software fix that's supposedly being rolled out that will potentially allow these 787 MAX 8s to go back into the air? Does it have anything to do with what you just described, where if the pilot actually tries to pull up on the throttle, that it would disengage the system?
So I don't know the details of the software fix. I know what has been reported in the press, that part of the software fix is that it will analyze, there are 2 of these angle of attack sensors, and it will analyze when you have contradictory data coming from those 2. That seems like a positive adjustment. At the end of the day, though, you've got to have the pilots knowing what's happening with the plane and with the ability to correct it. If the plane is steering down towards the ground and they don't have the ability to fix it, that is a major problem. And so I hope this software fix it enables us to fix the problem, but we need to be sure that this plane, that pilots know how to operate it safely. And so I'm going to wait and see. I think the FAA takes its job seriously. I called for grounding these planes before the FAA acted, and I'm glad that the FAA did act, because, look, in the state of Texas, We have tens of thousands of jobs that depend on airlines. We have millions of Texans and Americans, including you and me and all of us, who get on planes every day. Our family gets on planes every day. And we need to have the confidence that when you buy a ticket on an airplane and you sit down,
Senator, it seems like
that your safety is going to be protected.
I don't know. In this country, it seems like maybe you'd have a better chance of being totally confident. I'm just wondering, can the FAA and Boeing sign off on every airline and every pilot in every country in the world? I mean, we have enough trouble with our federal agencies knowing what they're doing with one another. How can we possibly know whether Ethiopian Air brought its pilots up to speed as mandated by Boeing's guidelines or the FAA's guidelines? How do we possibly know that?
Listen, from the dawn of air flight, there has been a governmental role and a regulatory role ensuring that planes are safe. And there are legitimate roles for government regulation, and I think that's clearly one of them. You may well be right that in the United States we've got a greater assurance of safety. That's certainly what I've heard from the leadership of airlines, and I'm sure it's true that they have more vigorous pilot training. That's one of the things this hearing is going to try to get after is listen, when Boeing is selling these planes, where we've seen these accidents so far have been Ethiopia and Indonesia. What training, what manuals are the pilots being given? Look, Boeing is providing that, and you can't expect a purchaser of a plane to know everything that's new. At the end of the day, it's the seller of the plane who has an obligation to explain if you fundamentally change the operating system, you do have an obligation to explain that to the pilots who are going to be flying innocent passengers in that plane.
Senator, Airbus just won a big order from a couple of Chinese airlines. Are you concerned that Boeing is going to suffer lasting damage from this, including these hearings?
Look, there has long been politics between Boeing and Airbus. And listen, as an American, I hope that Boeing prospers and thrives and creates lots and lots of jobs, continues to create lots and lots of jobs here in America.
Hey, Senator,
but aside from that battle between these two companies, there is a basic obligation. We've had two crashes on the same planes within a few months that appear to be caused by very similar mechanical malfunctions. We need to prevent that. We need to keep people safe. That's the responsibility of government, of elected officials, and then we're going to let the marketplace take care. I have every faith Boeing can compete and compete well in the marketplace, but we need to make sure that we're keeping people safe in the air at the same time.